to many of the
This is the first one. It's a prototype.
Naval Sea Systems Command, but Military Sealift Command, Naval Installations Command, Office of the Judge Advocate General. It's actually the oldest installation in the Navy.
It's 1 3/4 inch bore, 6.5 inches deep.
And work there every day. And so there's constant visitors and traffic doing business with these Navy activities.
I mean,
there's a slight taper to it. There's a handle on it. Weighs about 35-40 pounds. It's going to take about 3 ounces, maybe 3 ounces of double F black powder, which is a big charge, plenty of noise. Here's one that's fresh off the drill. You can see the weld that used to hold that thing in place, keeper weld. It hasn't been in the lathe, it's only been drilled. And that's a good size hole to be drilling in your home shop, 1 3/4 inch.
3 weapons, including an AR-15 and a shotgun.
Here are the bolts that we're turning into Thunderbolts. It's really a stud, 18 inches long, 3.5 in diameter, a nut on each end. Most of them have free nuts on one end, but some of them are tight. And this is the stock. You can see they're pretty big. So I'm going to cut these in half, and then they turn into 2 pieces. Here are some that are cut in half. You can see one laying down. There's the bottom of one. And to make this all work out well, I weld that nut on the bottom to the stud so it all becomes basically one piece. And these are palm bolts that hold a rudder to the rudder post in a ship. There's a flange on each side. There's a flange on the bottom of the rudder post and a flange on top of the rudder. And there's 10 of these altogether, and they are body fit bolts into these flanges, and these were condemned as being old and past their lifetime. Here we are cutting these things in half. Like a little setup in here. You can see it really looks like a bolt right here with one of the nuts off the end. And it takes about 5 or 8 minutes to cut through there on an easy pace. The hard part's putting it in there. The darn thing weighs 90 pounds. Saltwater has its way with these things. I like the character of it. I'm not going to clean it up too much. Just get the rust off and paint it.
Weapons around the base.
Here's the drill, 24-inch Cincinnati Bickford, 5 horsepower. Pretty darn heavy duty. And here's the table setup that I made. There's a right angle plate. The upper clamp, the lower clamp that holds the nut square, it all gets shimmed on there and measured. And we're using a spade bit. You can see it right there. That's 1 3/4 inch. And it makes a different kind of chip instead of a spiral chip that's dangerous on a big drill like this. It makes these little guys that you can see come out of there darn hot, but they're pretty interesting. This whole thing, when it's running, is one serious drill. There's the automatic feed stop. You can dial in whatever depth you want, set it up to stop, and then you don't have to mess with the thing. And these are the
their own demise.
Speed,
It's
spindle
very
speed
difficult to ever
controls,
say that you can get to a
feeds
zero
thousands per
Well,
revolution.
let me ask you, Vice Admiral, because one thing that I'm curious about is the fact
This is
that Karen Alexis was not
hand
an
feed, but
active
big drill
member
like this,
of
unless
the
it's a
United
small
States Navy
bit,
when
you just
allegedly did what he
pull that out
happened
and that
yesterday.
engages
He had been
the
in
power
Navy
feed, and
Reserves, but
you just
was
stand back and stay out of the way.
discharged in 2011 following,
everything
a
does
number
its
of
job.
incidents, including a 2010 gun
Well
incident
worth it.
in Texas. There's
It was a
also
job
reports
getting this drill in the
media that
shop.
he had been,
Let me tell you, it weighs
treated
3,000 pounds and it's tall.
some form of mental
Here's another view of my holding jig. This is the back, the table, and it comes around. Nice right angle plate off of eBay. There are 3 bolts holding it down, and then I just didn't have a T-slot, so I put a finger bolt on there just to make sure it doesn't vibrate on that corner. Vibration on this setup is 0, and let me tell you, you don't want any. No vibration. You can see the other 2 bolts, this end. Yeah. I spent a few days thinking about this, making sure it all worked out right. I didn't want any trouble. I drilled one hole with a 1 3/4 twist drill I had, and that was an experience. The long chips that coming off it were scary. The nuts are welded on to the bottoms of these studs that I've cut in half, and I'm going to clean up the bottom a little bit just to make it flat, so when it sits on the jig to drill the bore out, it's relatively true to everything. We're only talking 30 seconds here. This is not tight stuff. This is going to be done on a nice old Hendy lathe, and it's a pretty nice guy. Let's just go down here and bring her up to speed. Iron chips are hot. Here's the Hendy lathe. Nice old guy, made about 1947. We've got this half of the bolt between centers here, because the nuts are all individually made, and they put them in a 3-jaw chuck, and they don't center up very well. And these bolts are pretty beat up and they don't center up well at all anyway. So I've got a little drive unit welded on that fits into the castles, and then a dog, and then a center. And then I've got a bullnose center on this end holding the bore. And I'm using just a carbide tip to rough them here, and we're going to throw a taper with the taper attachment set up down there, and we'll get cutting here. A little power. Film's going to get a little jerky because I'm one-handing it here. Bring it up a little slow, everything looks good, there we go. It'll take about 30 thousandths off or so. And we're rolling. Coming up to the end of the cut of this first bit of taper. I'm going to shut down, come back, loosen up the taper attachment, dial in another 30 or so, lock the taper. And there's a little gap there so that all the monkey business can come out of that taper attachment as we approach. Engaging the feed. There it goes again. We do this until I get the taper down 2/3 of the way on the OD of this thing, just to give it a little bit of, look like a muzzle of a gun. The Thunderbolts. So I'll get all those fuse holes drilled, and then they'll be ready for letter stamping. And handles. I need a handle. The darn thing weighs 35 pounds. Handle all the recoil. Ready for stamping. They're all sitting right here. Cleaned up board. You can see the harmonics of the drill starting. The drill flexes a little bit and gets some interesting things going. But there's plenty of them.